Hi, welcome to Perfectly Imperfect Me. I am your host, Rachel, and today we are talking about something that I'm going to actually give you a trigger warning for. This episode is going to include frank discussion of self-harm and suicidal thoughts. If you or somebody that you know is in immediate danger, please call your local emergency room number, or if you're in the United States, you can call or text 988 right now. For other countries, please contact your local emergency services or your crisis line. This is also a reminder that this episode is for educational and supportive purposes, a little humor at times, but more importantly, this is not to be used as therapy. It is not to be used, even though I am a licensed clinical social worker, I am not your therapist. So this podcast, this episode especially, is for educational purposes only. So please do not think this is therapy. Do not use this in lieu of therapy or getting help with a professional mental health therapist, because that is not what this is. So we are going to get to this right now because you have probably seen someone online or in your life who scars themselves or cuts. And the first thing that you might think of or even say is, why would somebody do that? Or isn't that attention seeking? And let me tell you, it's actually the opposite. It's private. It's a survival skill that goes wrong. Today, I'm going to explain why in a way that actually helps you respond rather than freak out. And if you're a friend, a partner, a parent, or you're the one sitting with this urge, then this one is for you. So let's just dive in. And if at any time this is too much for you, please stop, come back to it later if you want, listen to it with a friend, just get yourself in a safe space. Let me just start off by remembering a client, and we're just going to call her Kayla, one of my first clients I'd ever had. And when I first met her, she had a ton of scars that she tried to hide. She was brilliant, even rude in a charming way, and she was terrified of being abandoned. Her self-harm was the only way that she could feel somewhat in control of an out of control kind of life. That's not attention seeking. It's survival for her. So let's just break down some myths about self-harm. And the first one is that self-harm equals suicidal intent. And it's not always. Sometimes yes, often no. Self-harm is usually a way of just surviving intense emotions, not to actually end one's life. Another myth is it's just drama. It's attention seeking. That is absolutely false, and it makes my blood boil when I hear that. Most people hurt themselves in private and they feel so much shame about it. Not attention seeking, and I'm pretty sure there are a million other ways that are less painful that someone can seek attention. Another myth I would like to talk about is that if you ask about it, it's going to make it worse. Not at all. Asking kindly often will reduce the shame and helps safely plan something with them. So let's talk about what self-harm is and the functions that it serves. I'm going to kind of use this from a DBT framework because, let's say it, I'm a DBT therapist, right? So I look at things very much from that way. And the first part about self-harm is the function is to regulate themselves. It's to stop overwhelming feelings. They want to stop feeling maybe numbness, panic, or shame. Someone feels unbearably empty or enraged, let's say, and a physical sensation brings them back or distracts them from what they're feeling. And one can say that although we know it is effective short term, we do know it isn't a way to solve problems. Some people also use self-harm as a way of punishing themselves, whether it's to punish perceived mistakes or the shame that they're feeling. Another way is that it is a nonverbal way to say, hey, I'm in pain, when they don't have the words to use. It's also another way for people to anchor themselves when they're dissociating. When someone dissociates, the pain from cutting or self-harm actually brings them back to their body. So again, it's another way of anchoring. And the last part is that there's a control. For some people, when life feels chaotic, hurting themselves can be the one thing that they can control. So imagine that your brain is like a radio with the volume at 11. Nothing you do calms it down. For some folks, physical pain turns that volume down. And not because they want the pain, but because they want to have less of the unbearable internal noise. Again, it is effective short term, but it's not a way of solving problems. I always tell my clients, behaviors have functions. And if you only punish behaviors without understanding the functions, then you miss the map. So let's just talk a little bit about the biology and the reinforcement loop that it has. So when somebody feels pain, it leads to basically endogenous opioids and dopamine that lead to brief relief, that lead to that behavior being reinforced. Okay, there's also emotional relief becomes negatively reinforced because you're removing the bad feelings. So when somebody acts on self-harm, they're removing the bad feelings that they don't want to have. But over time, it can become the go-to coping method because it reliably reduces the distress quickly. And so this is why just simply telling somebody to stop rarely works, because their brain has learned a fast shortcut out of unbearable emotions. Okay. And so, yes, therapy changes that brain stuff, but change takes new skills that also reliably reduce feelings. Because otherwise, why would anyone trade a behavior that works? So let's talk about the differences between self-harm and suicidal intent. So this is really important because many people think that somebody who self-harms, they just want to die. That is not true. So this is really critical and so important to understand, because suicidal intent is exactly that. It is a desire for life to end. Self-harm, which is a non-suicidal self-injury behavior, we say it's NSSI, non-suicidal self-injury, is a purposeful self-inflicted harm without the intent to die, which is often the case when people act on self-harm. And some people have both. Sometimes self-harm escalates. Sometimes it's purely a coping skill for them. So some things that you might want to ask, are they actually saying that they want to die? Do they have a plan? Do they have access to those means? Those are the red flags that need immediate safety responses. Okay. So some language that you can use with somebody when you're not sure is that you can ask, are you thinking about killing yourself? Have you had any plans or thoughts about how you do it? Do you have anything that could be used to hurt yourself? And yes, you can ask directly without causing harm. This is so important, guys. Direct questions are protective. They're not dangerous. Because let's be honest, you could still sound like a therapist and still be human and say, I'm really worried about you. Can we talk about this right now? So how do you help? What actually works? Let's just talk about immediate safety. If immediate danger is there, then you need to call emergency services. And a lot of people are so afraid of doing this because they don't want their loved one to be upset. Get over that, because at the end of the day, you'd rather them be angry at you than not be around any longer. If you can, help remove any access to lethal means if it's possible, whether they have some type of sharp object or a gun or something that they would use. I want you to be sensitive at doing this, but try to remove that. And then you can also help create a safety plan together. I'm going to give you a script. It's going to be in my show notes. If they are not in a crisis, okay, then talk about building supports. So let's talk about validating feelings first. If you are a loved one that's caring for somebody that has these thoughts, you could say that that sounds unbearable. I am so sorry that you're feeling this way. Avoid shaming or moralizing what's happening. Just simply offer some help, even sitting with them, distracting them, helping them ground themselves. Ask what they do that does help them feel safe. Learn what their coping toolbox looks like that doesn't include self-harm or suicidal thinking. Okay? I mean, DBT grounded skills that I can teach you really quickly are the tip skills. In DBT, temperature, intense exercise, pace, breathing, paired muscle relaxation, putting cold water on their face, holding ice cubes in a hand, splashing cold water on their face, okay, putting a cold washcloth on their back, 20, 30 seconds of intense movement, jumping jacks, jogging in place, jumping rope. You could do that quickly. Have them squeeze a stress ball, right? One way you could do is you could snap a rubber band on the wrist. And some people find this useful, but you have to be very careful because if it triggers harm, then you don't want to use that. Distract them with their pros and cons. If they made a pros and cons list when they're in wise mind of to hurt themselves now versus not, what will you do? What can you do? Can you buy time? Okay. What if you waited 24 hours? What might change? You also can use opposite action. So when impulse is to hurt, deliberately do the opposite. Call a friend, play a game on your phone, go outside. You could build a comfort kit. This is what we call distress tolerance kits. If you're in emotion mind, you might not be doing this at this time. So again, these are things that you want to build beforehand. Textures, scents, music, photos, list of people to call, grounding cards, I don't know, chocolate. If you live in a cold climate, put some things in there that are okay that you can have in the car. But in Florida, we can't keep chocolate things like that because they'll melt, right? But again, you can help build this crisis kit when you're in wise mind. You can also create a crisis coping plan, personalize it. What are some warning signs? What are things that you notice when things start to go south? What are some internal coping strategies that you could do alone? What are some people, places that you can contact for help, professional supports and emergency steps? Who can I call? Can I call my therapist for phone coaching? So if you are somebody who is struggling with urges, you could do any of those things. For friends or partners, here's what you don't want to say. Why would you do that? You're so selfish. Just stop it. If you did that, I'll leave. So instead, maybe say, I can't imagine how hard this is. I'm here. Tell me what you need right now. Longer term help that you can offer to them is encourage therapy, DBT, CBT. There's other evidence-based options as well. And medication can help for underlying mood instability. So maybe help refer them to a psychiatrist when it's appropriate. Even make a phone call. Okay. You can help build emotion regulation skills over time. You can encourage them to use them. And this is the real trade-off, learning skills that reliably reduce distress instead of a harmful shortcut. If you know some of these skills, this is how you can help them. And if you're the one who self-harms, let me just tell you this. I see you. Shame makes recovery really hard. You're not broken for having learned something that's helped you survive, even if it's not effective long term. So please be kind to yourself. Let's just start with one small, honest step. Tell one person, even if it's your therapist. It can be so terrifying, and I promise you it can be freeing as well. You can also make a safety plan. Keep it short. Keep it a short list of some immediate coping skills that you can do or try before acting on an urge. Whether it is grounding yourself, calling a friend, going to a public place, taking a shower, holding an ice cube. And I want you to practice replacing, not erasing. Try to learn multiple skills and practice them when you're not in a crisis so that they're actually usable later. And this is going to be key. This is the big piece of DBT, is that learning a lot of these skills and using them in everyday life when you're not in crisis first, so that you know how to use them and what they look like when you are in crisis. And if it's appropriate and with a professional, harm minimization conversation, which is all about what makes wounds safer. If you wound yourself, if you do act uncutting, let's talk about cleanliness. Let's talk about medical attention. This is really important to be handled with a clinician. So if you have acted on self-harm, please make sure you discuss this with somebody that is a clinician that can talk to you about medical attention. And if you feel suicidal, I need you to seek immediate help. You do not have to try to tough it out alone. You could say something like, this might be hard to hear. I've been hurting myself. I'm not trying to scare you. I really like your help with a safety plan. Because that is allowing you to let them know that it's not attention seeking. You don't really want to do this and you're struggling. And it's also letting somebody know that you're taking accountability for how you feel and what you don't want to do. So let's just kind of recap what I spoke about, which is that self-harm is a coping strategy with functions, primarily relief and communication, even when it's not effective long-term as a way to solve problems. You cannot go to your boss and say, hey, I'm so anxious right now, or I'm overwhelmed with this project. Let me go and cut. I need to take a break. Ask directly about suicide when worried. It's protective. Please validate, don't shame. Build a small, concrete safety plan. Even teach them and practice some DBT style skills, grounding, tip, distraction, opposite action. Therapy helps. DBT is one of the strongest evidence-based approaches for BPD and self-harm. And remember, if you're in immediate danger, please call emergency services or your crisis survival line in the United States. That is 988. I know that it is terrifying, and I know that it is messy, and people can change. They can learn different, safer ways to survive. And you being curious and compassionate, that actually does matter. So you have listened to a very intense and heavy episode. I really appreciate you listening if you're still here. And if you want some extras, whether it be a printable safety plan, template, a one-page list of grounding tricks, I'm going to leave them in my show notes. And I want you to just also remember that you don't have to ride this wave alone. There are plenty of therapists, there are plenty of clinicians, great ones out there. So if you need some support, please don't hesitate. But whatever you do, remember to please take care of yourself, be kind to yourself, because you matter. You deserve to be here. So with that being said, I am Rachel with Perfectly Imperfect Me 365, licensed psychotherapist. I'm now licensed in 9 states. So thanks again for joining me, and I really appreciate you. Have a great day.